Hello. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Nat, and on this channel I usually teach writers ways to master their craft and fall even more in love with storytelling. But today I am doing something a little bit different because I have been gone for a minute and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I was taking a mental health break because I have complex PTSD. What that is basically is PTSD comes from a single traumatic occurrence, and complex PTSD comes from repeated trauma throughout your life. It's just like PTSD, you know, flashbacks and triggers and jumps and startle response and stuff like that, but it's also got some extra mental difficulties on top of just the PTSD side of it. So I wanted to make this video to talk a little bit about my personal journey with my mental health and with my C-PTSD, especially when it comes to creating and writing, because it has a big impact. And it's not going to be very scientific, even though it could be. I know so much about neuroscience and psychology, but that's not really what this video is for. This video is just to kind of raise awareness that people are going through this, and let other writers know that they are not alone if they're struggling. I'll be talking about a few coping mechanisms that I use, but I don't want to go super in-depth into that. I do want to later. I want to make a whole series talking about mental health and creativity and how to work through your mental health as you write and with your writing. But today I don't really want to focus on coping or science very much, because that's not the focus of this video. The focus of this video is just to share my side of things and to offer support and acknowledgement to any other writers out there that struggle with similar things. I also will not be discussing any specifics or details about my personal trauma. If you do want to know more about what causes C-PTSD, you can totally research it. It's easy to find. So I'm going to try to edit this video as little as possible to give you a real inside look at how C-PTSD works and how it is for me. That being said, I move the camera a lot. I'm not gonna make you watch that. Sorry if that annoys you. I look at myself a lot. I'm sorry if that annoys you. I hope this video doesn't annoy you. Okay, let's get into it. So the first thing that I really struggled with C-PTSD, or not really the first thing, but the first thing that showed up that was noticeable, was I struggled to create. Really struggled. Like, I have written books my whole life. I've written several. I have always been a songwriter and a musician. And when my C-PTSD started to get really bad, which was around when I started high school, so it's been, I've mentioned in past videos that I took 4 or 5 years off from writing. I didn't really take them off from writing, but during that time I didn't finish any creative projects or stories because I didn't trust myself or my ideas. So it was really difficult not only to get the energy to start a novel, but then to see it through and finish it altogether. It was also really hard to believe that it was good. There was a lot of perfectionism going on, a lot of I don't know enough yet, I'm not good enough yet. Songwriting was the same deal. I couldn't write songs pretty much. I basically stopped, or I would write like half songs. Or if I did write songs, I would be very upset with them because there's always just this feeling of this isn't good enough yet, or I can do better than this. So why try? You know, like, I know I can do better than this, but for some reason it's just not accessible. I'm not capable of that right now, so I'm just gonna stop. Or like, I want to be better at this, but I cannot be, so I'm quitting. I wanted to do better than I was doing, and it felt impossible. And I'll go more into this in a second because I do want to talk about the specific symptoms of C-PTSD that influence creativity and why they do. But back then I didn't know those things. I just thought that I couldn't create anymore. I just thought that that was something I did as a kid that was gone now. Which, when you have a passion for something, is a very sad thought, to think that it's just over. And that part of your life where you were good at it and where you enjoyed it is gone. It's a lot. It's heavy. So I spent years struggling to create. I didn't write a full novel. I planned novels, I had ideas, I beat myself up over not finishing them, and then I just was completely stalled. And honestly, this part of the whole C-PTSD story was kind of like hell. It sucked. It was extremely painful because the desire to create, the wish to have my art and my music out there in the world wasn't gone, but it was just like I would sit down to create something and my brain, it's like it was locked. It was locked away. The creativity was stored somewhere else where I couldn't get to it. And it was like, what is happening? I know that I've done this before. I know how to do this. And it wasn't a conscious decision of like, I'm not good enough to write. Like, I'm not a good enough writer, so I'm not gonna write. And it wasn't like I'm gonna write as soon as I do this thing, or as soon as I finish this class, I'm gonna write. It was just, I want to write so bad, and I can't. So, a lot of hopelessness around that time. A lot of feeling lost and really discouraged because I had no idea what was happening, and I was like, okay, I guess I can't do this. Like, there has to be something, I guess I have to pick something else. I have to focus on something else. And I never really thought of writing as a career before, but it was just like I started painting. I played more pieces that were already already composed. I just had to adjust. Find new things to do, new things to love, new things to occupy myself. Because when it came to writing, whether it was writing stories or music, it was like a ball. Complete block. And it also wasn't writer's block in like the usual sense, because usually that stems from somewhere like a lack of confidence. Okay, well, it kind of did come from that, but usually writer's block stems from something fixable. Like, you can just tell yourself affirmations, or you can fix the problems in your plot, fix the plot holes, develop your characters more, and it'll start to feel easier, and it'll come more naturally. Or sometimes you just need a break from your story, so you take a break, and then usually after that you're good to keep creating. But it was literally years of trying all kinds of things and just resigning myself to the fact that it wasn't going to happen. But finally, last year, COVID hit. Wow, I can't believe it's been a year. And my mental health took such a plunge because, I mean, everyone's did, right? With lockdown and all the anxiety and stuff. But it hit my C-PTSD particularly hard. And also during that time, I was disabled. I couldn't walk because my foot had an old injury had flared up, and I ended up needing surgery on that foot twice, which was not helpful at all. But that was happening during the same time as COVID, so my brain kind of freaked out. And that is when I was diagnosed with C-PTSD. And I've been in therapy for a while for mental health issues and stuff, anxiety, depression, the huge, but it had never occurred to me that there was maybe something else. And for some reason, therapists didn't bring it up to me or tell me about it, which is a little upsetting looking back. So I was 19 when I finally learned what was actually causing all of this stuff. So let's talk a little bit more about the difference between PTSD and C-PTSD. So PTSD comes from a single event. C-PTSD comes from months or years of prolonged trauma. And trauma has a couple different definitions, but the one I like the most is trauma is something that did happen that shouldn't have, or something that didn't happen that should have. And the trauma's worse when you don't have the resources or support to process it correctly. And like I said, we can go into this more in depth in a later video about all the technical stuff behind what I'm saying. But basically, we're all kind of somewhat familiar with PTSD, right? You get nightmares, flashbacks, you avoid things that remind you of the trauma or the event. Typically, people get a little bit aggressive or angry or defensive. They have a heightened startle response, and their thinking patterns become pretty negative. So that's PTSD. C-PTSD adds a layer. On top of that, C-PTSD comes with more cognitive distortion, trouble regulating emotions, processing emotions, regulating impulses, trouble sleeping. Usually it comes with chronic health issues. Lots of the time it comes with chronic pain. But basically the body stores your trauma, so it can show up in all kinds of different physical ways. C-PTSD comes with a big, loud critic, a very judgmental critic. So a lot of people with C-PTSD struggle with self-hate, or very commonly intense imposter syndrome. People with CPTSD have trouble trusting themselves, believing in themselves, believing that they're capable of what they want to do or that they can achieve what they want to achieve. Also with CPTSD comes memory issues. So a lot of people with CPTSD will have ADHD-like symptoms of memory loss. And that aggression and anger that comes from PTSD turns into hostility. And another huge thing with CPTSD is a loss of or distortion of identity. So a lot of people with CPTSD struggle to form their identities and know who they are and know what they enjoy or what they want in life. And the reason behind all of this is because with both PTSD and CPTSD, your brain and your nervous system decide that they need to be on all the time. They need to be on guard. They need to be vigilant. They need to be watchful. They need to be careful. They need to be on it. They need to be ready for the next attack. They need to be prepared for things to go wrong. And essentially what that does is it locks up the creative brain power. Because if you think about like cavemen, it doesn't make sense to sit and tell stories or make art or music or create anything when you have to go find food or avoid being eaten or make weapons. It just doesn't make sense. The body determines that creating it's the last priority when it comes to survival. It's not essential, doesn't keep you alive, doesn't keep the danger away, doesn't protect you, really, in the way that the body thinks that you need to be protected, obviously. Like, there are some great benefits to and reasons to create. It's a great coping mechanism, and it can really help process those emotions and get through difficult times. But at a certain point, your body says no, and it shuts you down. When you have PTSD and your body thinks that you are constantly under attack and it constantly needs to be hypervigilant and watching for the next threat and preparing for the next threat, creating is much harder, much, much harder. My diagnosis helped me understand everything in the past about why it was so hard to create. And just that understanding and that awareness and recognition of what's happening and what you're going through and what you have been through, sometimes that's enough to just feel peace and calm. Because like I said, one of the hallmarks of CPTSD is a really judgmental critic in your head. And if you can say to that critic, look, I have CPTSD, don't bully me, like, I'm doing my best, it helps a lot. That being said, it doesn't cure it. CPTSD is a long-term thing. It's something that you go to therapy for years. You find coping mechanisms for it for years. You just process for years and you heal for years. So I had to learn some ways to cope on a day-to-day basis. But I will say that a big part of this for me was processing some stuff. Still have lots to do, but I didn't start writing until I actually got into kind of an intensive treatment. So I didn't start writing until, for real and finishing books until late last year. Not that you're not writing for real if you're not finishing books, but I wasn't dedicated. I wasn't meeting my own idea of success. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about coping mechanisms really in this video, still am not going to, but I wanted to just mention a couple of things that have helped me. So some examples of how I cope day to day are, number one, I try to create a general sense of security and safety around myself, whatever that means to you. Two, I just have to take it easy, which this is so hard for me. I still really beat myself up about it. But if I'm not writing every day, or if I'm not writing for a week, or I find also that sometimes I will be more connected to some stories than others because, spoiler alert for later in the video, which we're going to talk about it, but trauma shows up a lot in art. We know this from looking at artists and paintings, but it also really shows up in books, in theme and character arcs. And so sometimes based on, what I'm processing or what I'm going through or what I'm coping with or working on in my own trauma history in my own brain, sometimes that will change what I'm interested in working on. Because every book has a different theme and every book has a piece of my healing in it. So I bounce around from idea to idea and it makes the writing slow. Another thing that I have to do is kind of talk to and work with my critic. This is hard. For a lot of CPTSD survivors, there's always a sense that there could be more. It could be better. And not even that it could be, but it has to be. It has to be better. You have to be better. And so it can make it really difficult to commit to anything or participate in anything or present anything or just do anything that you're not an expert at. And it's not even perfectionism because, like, I know in my brain that I can't be perfect, but it's just like, kind of a negative filter of like when you see what you've done, you don't focus on, wow, I did that. And it's cool. It's good. And like, I'm proud of myself. You just focus on, oh, like, that hair's out of place. Oh, I could find a better word to describe this thing. Oh, I'm not as good as this writer. Oh, I thought this was really good and now it's not. Oh, this story didn't pan out how I wanted it to. Just lots of negative focus. Lots of negative focus. So I have to talk to my critic a lot. I create structure in my days, in routines and stuff like that. That's very helpful for most people, but also extremely helpful for PTSD and trauma survivors. And a big part of why it's hard to do new things and put yourself out there and develop new skills is the imposter syndrome. I struggle with imposter syndrome so much on this channel. I've spent thousands of hours, tens of thousands of hours perfecting this craft, learning about it, doing it, redoing it, editing it, pulling it apart, analyzing it. And still, I struggle with this feeling that I am not the one who should be doing this. Or like there are already people out there teaching other people how to write. There's nothing new I can bring to the table. A big one is that I don't have a published book yet. And so I have been trying really hard to finish a book so that I can give it to you guys and publish it and let you read it and see that I am a writer, because it's hard to educate people and say, hey, I know about writing, when they can't go read your writing and see that you know about writing. Plus just learning how to do it is difficult. Like learning how to put together a YouTube channel. Like one example of my inner critic is I've been moving this camera like crazy throughout this video. I will show you that now. And that's because I'm looking at myself, because I have it on selfie mode, because when I put it not on selfie mode, oh my god, I still have Netflix open. When I put it not on selfie mode, I get insecure and I worry, like, is there hair out of place? Is there something in my teeth? Is there like something on my face? Like, it doesn't stop. It's hard. It's difficult. And it's also normal. And that was one of the biggest things that really helped me, was learning that it's normal. It's the normal response when your brain has gone through something traumatic, destabilizing, unsafe. Like, if you have a cold, you gotta carry tissues everywhere. And that's just how it is. So, the last thing. So, I write when I'm not triggered. And when I'm triggered, I kind of don't. My neck hurts. Oh my god. And when I am triggered, I don't really write, because I have to do other things to kind of stabilize before I can access that part of me, that part of my brain. That being said, now that I have processed some stuff and worked through some stuff and learned kind of how to cope, which if you're trying to do that same thing and learn about and process things so that you can get back to kind of life as it was, or a new life, here are a few things that I recommend you learn about. Polyvagal theory, attachment theory, and then DBT, some dialectical, behavioral, mindfulness coping strategies. Those are the biggest things that really helped me, was just learning about neuroscience and how chemically and structurally things were happening in my brain. Amazon. Unused student deals. I'm not a student. It's another C-PTSD thing. Makes it so hard to commit to things, to pick one thing and do it. And your energy just doesn't last as long. Your bandwidth is not as wide. You can't do as much as a non-traumatized human. But that's okay. I really hope I'm not distracting y'all by looking at myself and moving around. I'm distracting myself. Ugh. Now that I've learned about CPTSD and the window of tolerance and triggers and stuck points, and learned some tools to cope with those, like ABC sheets, my writing is a huge healing tool. It's very important in how I express myself, but also how I process some of the things that I've been through and lessons I've learned or need to learn. It's a way to feel, to kind of, it's kind of about self-discovery, because you get to try on a bunch of different hats and be a bunch of different people, but it's also about stepping into power. A really common thing that a lot of trauma survivors feel is disempowered and kind of weak and powerless. Writing helps me get back to that. I am powerful, I am capable. And it also just lets me check out for a minute. Usually that's not a good thing, to dissociate from life and check out of reality and just be in a fantasy world. But it's the same as like watching a TV show, basically. I get to go hang out somewhere else and hang out with people that I created for a while. And that is usually easier for me than the alternative, which is sitting around and numbing. There are lots of other ways to get your emotions out, but like I said, I'm still kind of in the beginning of my recovery, so I'm not very fluent in different ways to cope. Though I'd like to be, but yeah. So that's why I took a mental health break. If you missed the new channel launch, the announcement basically is that I am no longer sticking to a concrete schedule for video releases or announcements or anything like that. They're just gonna come as they come. Because with CPTSD, you really can't schedule your energy or your breakdowns or your really intense triggers or what you're gonna be interested in when the time comes to make a video. I'm filming this in November of 2021, so it's been a couple months. Hopefully they're good, but the last couple months for me right now in the present have been hard, have been really, really hard. And it's important to notice when you need that pause and you need that grounding and that kind of reset. I wish I didn't need it so much. Other people with mental illnesses or trauma probably wish the same thing, but hey, it is what it is. So I'm back. I still really love educating on this channel and talking about story, but it's just going to be kind of a not sporadic. I'm gonna try to kind of have a schedule because like I said, schedules really help for PTSD, but the point is to not beat myself up and overwork myself in the name of upholding a schedule. I hope to talk in the future a little bit more about specifically things that I've been through and how I cope with those and stuff like that. But for now, I think that's it. So if you are a writer and you struggle with any kind of mental illness or trauma, and if you're sitting there asking yourself, is that me? I'd be willing to bet probably, yeah. If you're wondering whether or not you're traumatized, you probably are. That's something I've learned. Trauma really isn't as big. It doesn't have to be as big, and it usually isn't as big as we think. It's not always some huge disaster. CPTSD happens over years, and it can be very subtle. Looking back, I'm like, how did I not know that I had PTSD? But I just didn't. Thank you so much for watching today, for joining me to talk about CPTSD in all its wonderful glory. If you liked this video, or if it helped you, I would so love a thumbs up. If you're interested in seeing more content about writing and storytelling, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed. And as always, you know this because you're on YouTube, we all know this, ring the bell for notifications for when a new video comes, which you might need because I am doing a looser schedule that's not going to be very predictable. Or you can follow me on Instagram. I have extra writing tips there and updates, and I also announce videos on there. So I hope you are well. I hope your 2022 has been good so far. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy trails.